Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Match It and the Other Guy. And thank you very much for joining us. I'm here down at Lake Wylie with my good friend Kevin, and we're going to have a conversation. As always, I have no idea what that conversation is going to be about and what it will concern. So Kevin, get us up and running. What are we talking about today?
Well, you may remember quite a little ways back, we were having a discussion one time about a project that we were kind of thinking about, and I said, oh, well, you must have all these great crew shirts from your days in the pit lanes and such, and you said, well, I hardly have any. Expand upon that.
Yeah, you Formula One team gear, really.
Exactly.
We're talking about, yeah. Yes, I have, I think, one piece of Benetton team kit, which is a rain jacket. And that's the only thing I have. And I really wish I had a race shirt because, it'd just be nice to have one. I'd like to frame it and put it on the wall, but I haven't got it. And the reason I haven't got it, yes, as we chatted about before, was typically at the end of the season, this is when I was racing, a quarter of a century ago, pretty much now, Adelaide was always the last race of the season in Australia. And it was very typical that in that last race, there would be a lot of enthusiasts and supporters of the sport would love to get hold of some pit equipment, team equipment. That last race in Adelaide, Australia, was a wonderful event. It was great fun from start to finish. The Australians, they love motorsport. They absolutely adore Formula One. And, of course, they're a very laid-back nation. Any opportunity to have a beer, let's have a beer. And we enjoyed that. We were always being very well taken care of. And if we were in the hotel bar, folks wanted to come up and have a chat and talk about sport in general.
Yep.
It's great fun. And after the race in Adelaide, I was always looking for somewhere to go. Our boss, let me put it this way, our boss, Flavio Briatore, well-known, flamboyant Italian businessman, used to say to us at the end of the season, we don't really care how you get back to England, because going back to England from Australia, it doesn't matter which direction you go, it's pretty much...
It's quite a journey either way.
It's quite a journey, whether you go back via the United States, whether you go back via Asia, whether you want to stop off at Bali, go back to Europe, or wherever it would be, pretty much it doesn't really make a great deal of difference financially to the team what you do. And unlike some teams, and every team had their own different management style, Flavio didn't care how we got back. So I would make the decision, along with a few teammates, to always try and go to the Barrier Reef, up in Queensland, North Australia, and dive off the Barrier Reef, which was just a tremendous experience. Loved
so it kind of got to be tradition, I guess.
It became a little bit of a tradition to do that, to go up to Queensland. Port Douglas was the little town, right at, I could say right at the side of the reef, but I mean, it's like an hour's boat trip to get out to the reef, Mm-hmm. So we do that. So that's really the reason why. One of the main reasons why I haven't got a race shirt hanging in my house framed, which much I would like. The other reason is that you may know that I lived in France for about 15 years. Having quit Benetton, I went down to France to, become a writer because I thought that'd be a cool thing to do.
Yep.
But I was.
Many books later, apparently it must have been.
Well, it worked out okay. But one of the main reasons for going to France was it was the cheapest place I could find to live. England was too expensive, and property in France at the time was very affordable. So I bought a ramshackle old farmhouse down in France. But when I eventually left France to move over to the States full time, I simply had to get rid of everything. Not everything, but 90% of stuff. It's simply just too heavy and too expensive to transport across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
So a lot of other stuff went as well, and yes, I've now sort of I've taught myself to let go of stuff. It's actually been a great cathartic experience moving from England to France and France to the States, because it forces you to let go of stuff. Yeah.
That's true, and it kind of seems to be a trend right now, is the whole downsizing and getting the quality items to stay, and those that are kind of a burden moved on.
Yeah, and it's something that we've talked about before. It's the weight of the physical weight, the mass, if you like, of of books and vinyl albums and that sort of stuff. Like when you're moving house, it's only when you start to put all this stuff into boxes and load it into trucks to move from A to B that you realize just how much stuff you've amassed, you know. And I would find, as I'm sure we all do, that when I moved from Chippy Norton in Oxfordshire down to Cognac in France, like everybody does, you know, I put everything into cardboard boxes and sealed it up with tape and wrote on the box diligently what was in there. And I found that when I was moving from France over to the States, 85% of those boxes had never been opened.
Yeah.
From the day that I left England. So there was the evidence. Like, you know, you amass all this stuff, and occasionally you would open the box and look in and say, oh, yes, I remember that. Wasn't that fun? Close the box and never think about it again until the next time you open the box. So, you know, I got rid of a lot of stuff, yeah.
Oh, there's been many times I've come across something and go, I forgot I even had this.
Exactly
and
that.
Apparently it's not on the user list or often found and put to its proper use very often.
Yes, I mean, I think that if you actually keep a list, keep a tally of items of clothing, maybe this is more of a guy thing, I don't know, items of clothing and items you use around the house on a daily basis throughout a week or throughout a month, it's almost nothing in comparison to the stuff that you've got, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you start off, I mean, you know, here you start off, you know, kind of early in your career. You're maybe getting your first apartment, and you're wanting to build, and you need, I need a potato masher. I don't have a potato masher,
right,
or whatever. And then you get something as a gift or a hand-me-down, and you're building and building. And then at what point, you know, in someone's life, they decide, now it's time to start thinning that back down. I don't need it, so you go up the hill, and now you're back on the downslope.
Yeah. Well, there was a tradition in England, and I'm sure you will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure the tradition's the same in the United States, that at one time there was this tradition in England called the bottom drawer tradition, and it was gifts from parents and relatives that were put in the bottom drawer of a dressing table, whatever it would be, you know, chest of drawers, so that when you got married, you started to amass a certain amount of essentials you would need, you know, silverware, plates, pots and pans, and you say, you know, potato masher. Put that in the bottom drawer to be great when you get married. But of course, you know, the world has changed, society's changed now. Most folks, they leave home before they get married. They're in an apartment, and you know you've already got all of that stuff. So even before you get married, you hardly really need anything. You know, everyone's got everything they need. Quite frankly, you don't need 18 potato mashers. I don't think. I've never found a need for 18.
Oh, unless you're feeding literally the regiment in the army or something like that.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So do you feel the same way as I've sort of intimated there, that unloading stuff and getting rid of stuff, and basically now just not buying anywhere near the amount of stuff? Are you that way too?
I'm starting to fall that direction, which again, that makes my wife smile somewhere. She's grinning now. But you start to just realize, you know, if you don't use it or whatever, or if you start collecting something that you're passionate about, you might let a lot of other stuff go to help that along.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned, you know, moving, and if you have like things that are just take up weight, books and all that, it's probably a good idea if you're going to become a collector at any age to kind of think about that down the line, because it's going to be a whole different ball game if you collect, say, baseball cards as a side to cuckoo clocks. Imagine moving 18, 50 or so cuckoo clocks as opposed to, you know, one box of quality cards may take up one space in a shoebox.
Yes, I mean there are folks that collect Formula One race engines, blocks, and that sort of stuff. Where you wouldn't want to move that stuff very far, would you? Really?
No matter what it is out there, there's a market for it. Somebody that's going to collect.
Yeah, there absolutely is. Yeah. Yes, I'm pleased that I've reached that stage in my life now where I don't really look to amass things any longer. I used to like to collect books at one time, and I'd look for first editions. I mean, not particularly rare first editions because I could never afford them, but a few bookshops would have nice copies of books, what I consider nice, beautiful sort of leather bound copies, not particularly valuable in terms of collectible books, but they're kind of cool volumes to have.
Oh, absolutely.
But I hit the same problem. As you know, I'm a Hemingway reader, and I like Hemingway books, but you probably notice on my bookshelf in there, most of the books on that bookshelf are, the majority of them are Hemingway books and Orwell books, but the Hemingway books, I've got the same title 3 or 4 times, because I'd come across another fun edition and think, I must have that, let's add that to the collection,
Sure.
but what am I going to do with them? You're not going to read one, For Whom the Bell Tolls. I think there's probably 3 or 4 copies of For Whom the Bell Tolls on the bookcase. Well, you're only going to read one, but yes, I have weaned myself off that.
Well, for quite some time with your career, your job was very nomadic.
Yeah.
So you probably had to travel quite light, so there wasn't a big need much for even a home base, never mind a home base filled with stuff.
Yeah, well, you're right. This is something we've chatted about before, isn't it? That, in our younger years, and I was racing really in my 30s, late 20s and 30s, but in that lifestyle, or pretty much any career when you're much younger, at the drop of a hat, you're prepared to just jump on a plane and go, right? You don't.
If I'm back in a week, great. If not, if it's 3 weeks, hey, I've got no place I have to be.
Yeah. And that alone, that too, I say that alone, that too is also good practice for travelling in independence. Because you see so many folks when they're travelling and they go on vacation, it's almost a cliche, sort of bags and bags and bags of stuff that they take with them. But I've always just thought, wherever you're going to go, within reason in the world, if you haven't got a spare pair of socks or you've forgotten a pair of shoes or whatever it will be, there's probably going to be a shop
Somebody's going to sell you.
Right.
Exactly.
You're going to be able to get them right there, right?
So when you wrapped up did you holiday in Australia each time, or there a time when you went straight off to someplace else, or?
Well, towards the end of my time with the race team, so we won the World Championship, the Constructors' World Championship in '95. But we as a team, Benetton, were so concerned about not letting the ball slip away from us now we'd got it, that we went straight back to England after '95, I seem to remember, to start work as soon as possible on the '96 car.
Well, you could have been more geared up and ready to go.
Yeah. It didn't work out for us, as history will tell us. The loss of Michael Schumacher to Ferrari fundamentally, finished Benetton. Michael left, and then there was a plethora of key personnel followed him along. Rory Byrne, the aerodynamicist, left, and then Ross Brawn, the great strategist and great engineering brain, left the team, and then Flavio left the team, and within a very short space of time, all of a sudden, Benetton wasn't Benetton any longer. And I felt exactly the same way, and something I've written about in my books. We change as we go through life. What was important to us, I say yesterday is probably a short time frame, but what was important to us 10 years ago probably isn't as important to us now. We shift as we go through life, don't we? We evolve that, and there's nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just, So yes, I was quite happy when my days at Benetton came to an end, primarily because of my back injury. That was in '96 in Brazil. So I did the first couple of races, but we were so exhausted even before the first race began in '96. Because we'd been testing with a new car, and we had 2 new drivers, Berger and Alesi, on board. We're nowhere near as proficient as giving us the correct feedback that we wanted to make progress on the car, and we as a team were exhausted. I think there was a sort of talk about virus, and I think most of the team were affected with either severe flu or bronchitis at one point as well.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, and so by the time we got to the first race, which, if I remember right, was back down in Australia, it was Melbourne, we were absolutely destroyed before we started. And I remember when I got to Brazil, which I think was probably round 2 or round 3, I can't remember now. I just couldn't go on any longer. I just decided that was it. So I was probably in a weakened state anyway, and had that back injury during a practice pit stop on the Thursday. And that fundamentally finished my time as a race team mechanic, and then I went to work on the test team for a while. But that was, in this stage, I was already getting geared up for the move to France. So I'd already sort of set my goals in the future. And, so what was happening around me was kind of okay. I wasn't upset by having to stop racing. And again, I'd seen with my own eyes, as we all had, the collapse of what was Benetton. Benetton simply wasn't the same thing any longer. So, not sure how we got onto that, but not that it matters.
Well, during the time you were racing and stuff, you were obviously in the garage almost all the time. But which track and city did you most enjoy visiting? Each year.
Without any, Formula One used to go to some terrific tracks, and still does visit some great tracks. But it's the old classic circuits that have always excited me. Particularly Monza and Spa. But if anybody asks, Monaco again, of course, but if anybody asks which is the race, I enjoyed the most, it would be Suzuka in Japan.
Oh, really?
Beautiful country. I've always had a soft spot for Japan. I like to hear that. I don't speak Japanese, but I like to hear the language being spoken. I think it's a very beguiling, wonderful language when spoken softly. And the circuit is a great challenge, with the fact that it is both clockwise and counterclockwise due to the changeover of the circuit halfway through. So it's neither one or the other, it's a little of each. Great racing memories, particularly of Senna and Prost coming together twice at the hairpin. But primarily, it's the enthusiasm of the Japanese race supporters, which was just terrific.
That's a big part of it.
Incredibly polite. If they were, if they were told, please don't cross this line, don't get any closer to the garages because we need to protect the cars and we need to consider the safety of everybody, so don't cross that line. Most other circuits, like at Monza, for example, we'd put tensor barriers, sort of corded barriers like you see at airports across the pit lane and across the garage entrance to prevent people coming through. Well, you will constantly have to keep pushing people back, get back, but please, give us some space to work. But in Japan, you simply didn't need to do it. You would have a painted line that was on the pit lane. It had been there for years. One side was the garages and one side was the pit lane. And I think it actually says painted on the line, pit lane and garage each side. And the supporters would come right up to that line and never cross it.
Wow.
They would never cross it. They would, it was wonderful.
Fervent enthusiasm, but with great respect.
Yes, with great respect. Yes, that's exactly it. They had wonderful... They seemed to support everybody. But, of course, they were passionate about Honda. They were passionate about Senna.
The Honda connection, for sure.
Passionate about the Japanese drivers. But they had a genuine support for all teams. It was tremendous. And... in the days leading up to the Grand Prix weekend itself, we would fly out, for example, a week before the race. All teams would, and would be building the cars in the pit lane garages and getting to the point of firing up the cars, firing up the engine on the Thursday, and with the car on high stands up in the air, and then go through the gearbox, work the car through the transmission to make sure that all the gears were working. And in the days leading up to that point, it was traditional that all the local schools would bring the kids into the circuit and they would be allowed to sit on the grandstands opposite the pit lane while we were working on the cars, and they would all have lunch
and watch us working. Well, they learn something. You're getting to experience something.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so they would sit there with their little packed lunches, having lunch, and then dressed in the most exquisite little sailors' uniforms, just wonderful. And when any team was ready to fire their engine up, so whether it was Benetton or Ferrari or Williams or McLaren, it didn't matter, and the mechanics would fire the car up, and of course back in those days it was the very loud V10s, V12, V8s, and brum, 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 running the car up for a couple of minutes, go through the gears, and then the mechanics would switch the engine off, boom, and then there'd be this wonderful round of applause from the kids on the other side of the pit lane.
That's awesome. Yes. I love it.
Yes, I've never seen anything like it. Yeah, so yes, a very soft spot for Japan, for Suzuka, for the track, and most especially for the supporters and the enthusiasts of Formula One in Japan. Yeah. How about you? If you could choose any race that you haven't been to, do you have a particular track you think I'd love to go to?
Well, I mean, of course, like I say, you mentioned Monaco.
Yeah.
You've got to see Monaco. It's the Super Bowl of the sport.
Yes.
You want to say you've done the greatest of all, but it's a totally different, racing experience there. But to just see the grandeur and all of it, and the history, and would be quite a vacation. I do have a friend that he visited there just, in different time during the year, but they drove him around what would be the circuit, and he remembers, here's where the pit boxes are and everything like that. So got a feel for it. And of course there's, support memorabilia there year round that, he could enjoy. So one of these days. But
Monaco Monaco is unquestionably a wonderful classic race. And of course, from the team's perspective, it's much better now. It used to be awful in terms of the logistics of being able to work there.
Well, it used to be the pit box was right on the track, essentially, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I've often said during our Formula One broadcast, it's a small French fishing village. We call it Monaco, but in essence, it's a small French fishing village. And trying to hold a race in a small French fishing village makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah, so there was no real paddock, obviously. So the paddock used to be the quayside, right at the side of Monaco Harbour. And the pit lane was part of the front straight, if you like. But there was no direct connection between what was the paddock and what was the pit lane. So in the morning, very early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, all the teams would push their cars from the quayside up into the pit lane, where they have these tiny little garages, but they weren't big enough to get the cars in. They were simply for tyre storage and tool storage. So the cars were always outside in the pit lane in Monaco. And then the pit lane would be closed, and so we couldn't get back to the paddock. The only way then of getting back to the paddock was this serpentine, awful route of going upstairs through scaffolding ladders up and across the track, and then back down through Rascasse and round the corner and back into the paddock. And then you'd get whatever tools you need, and if you needed a new nose or whatever it would be for a different session, if we didn't take that up when we should have done, a couple of the guys would have to do this serpentine route down, up, just
get it on the first time.
Don't forget to take it in the morning, yeah. And then, of course, as soon as the practice sessions were finished and we needed to work on the cars through the evening, we'd have to do the same thing. All the tools, all the cars, all the equipment would be loaded into vans, into trucks. We'd physically push the cars back down, round the corner of Rascasse, out of the entrance of the pit lane, down Rascasse and back into the quayside. And all the vans would arrive with all the tools, and then we'd work on the cars throughout the night in the awnings at the side of the, on the trucks. We didn't have any garages, there's no garages to work in. And then in the morning again, should we be fortunate enough to actually be able to get to sleep, go back to the hotel and sleep was a luxury. Some nights, if we had problems with the car, we'd simply carry on working through the night, and the next morning push the cars back up again and do the same thing all over again. So in terms of logistic from the teams, it was a nightmare. But as you rightly say, and it is true, no question, even for the awful experience of working there, to win Monaco is
exactly. It's always a feather in the hat.
Of course it is. Yeah, it's a Monaco Grand Prix.
And I think I have an interest in it somehow. It was probably, I think, my senior year in high school. I don't remember actually which class it was in, but we did something where the teacher put names of countries in a bowl.
Yeah.
And we were to pull out a name, and you were assigned that country, and then to do a report on it. And lo and behold, I pulled up Monaco.
Oh, no kidding.
So I did a little report on it and stuff like that. That really kind of got me doing some research on it back then. And I still remember doing that. So.
And did you write about the Formula One experience?
Definitely mentioned that was a big part of what they're known for. And of course, just the interesting part of Prince Rainier marrying Grace Kelly and all that, So.
Well, I tell you what I like particularly about visiting Monaco. Despite all the glitz and the glamour, which is a wonderful thing to see, and the great car collections and the beautiful people are there, and all of the opulence and everything that we associate with Monaco, we have to remember, of course, that underpinning all of that are genuine, real, regular folks that work there every day, live there and work there. They're driving the trucks, and the fresh fish market and the vegetable market, the fruit market is there every day. And there are little bars and little tucked away corners where the Monegasque, the locals, gather and have a pastis or a beer or a wine. And so I used to get great pleasure in seeking those little corners out.
Yeah.
So if we did have any spare time, the idea of, one of my great memories. Funny enough, I only wrote about this on Twitter the other day. I don't know what really made me think about it. One year, the famed Tabac corners. You come through. For those familiar, with the layout of Monaco, you come barreling through the tunnel, and now you're down on the harbour front, and you go straight down the harbour front, and then there's a sharp left. Well, that corner is called Tabac, 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 whichever way you want to say it, which is French for literally tobacconist. And there is underneath the grandstands, or it used to be. I don't know if it's still there now. Again, I'm going back 20-something years. There used to be a little magazine, a little shop there for resupply the yachts. So it was a marine resupply shop, but it wasn't. I don't mean it was for tools and equipment. It was food and supplies, whatever.
Staples.
Staples, exactly. Yeah, like a little what do you call them? Like a chandler, I suppose, like a supplier for the harbour. But I went in there with a couple of Benetton colleagues, and we just bought a baguette and some brie and a bottle of local red, whether it was Chateau Neuf de Pape, I'm not sure, it might have been actually. And just sat on the side of the harbour on the seawall there and just had a very simple picnic watching the sun go down over the Mediterranean.
Well, you enjoy a very French lifestyle in Monaco, I believe, right?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. But yes, absolutely. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's France.
They may not want you saying that, but
yeah, it's the Principality of Monaco, but the Principality of Monaco relies about 99.99% on the country of France to look after them.
Yeah.
And so yes, it's very much French.
Well, you mentioned that a lot of times you were really working under the awnings of the trucks and everything like that. I guess the weather there is very. I don't recall ever seeing a very rainy Monaco race or anything like that.
It does rain, and it's but it's one of those little microclimates that changes very quickly.
Yeah, wait 15 minutes.
Kind of wait 15 minutes, yes, and you can see it blow it in. So what tends to happen with the weather front in Monaco, in my experience, I mean, I've spent several, I suppose all in all, I've probably spent about a month there in total, split up over the years in 3 days here and 3 days there. But what I tended to see with the weather climate, the microclimate in Monaco, the rain would build out in the Mediterranean and the clouds would blow in, and you can see it coming. And then behind Monaco, you've got the hills, you've got the mountainside there, the Corniche, if you like. And so the weather would blow in from the sea, go through Monaco, up over the hills at the back, and then circulate. It would catch another air current and blow back out to sea. And so you could see it physically coming in. You could see it rolling up. So you'd have a lot of sort of mist. If it was gonna rain, you could tell it because it started to get very misty. And the weather front would come in up over the hills, go back out, and if you were lucky, it would stay out there. But sometimes, of course, it would catch that lower wind and be blown back in. You get this sort of endless cycle.
Okay.
Yeah, but on the whole, of course, you're on the Côte d'Azur, and it is a very beautiful place down there. Beautiful.
I'd imagine it's gorgeous.
Yeah, the sun glinting off the Med, the Côte d'Azur, the d'Azur with this sort of idyllic blue colour to it. But yes, it is a beautiful spot down there. And again, to take nothing away from Monaco, but you only have to drive 10 or 15 miles either side of Monaco, and you're surrounded, once again, you're back in sort of old Provence. You're in these little tiny villages that haven't really changed for literally hundreds of years. So you can find very affordable hotels, and you can find little cafes and bars and restaurants that are going to take care of you, not for a great deal of money.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And a lot of folks do that. Always consider, just to a wider audience here, if ever you want to attend the Monaco Grand Prix, there is a very regular train service going in and out of Monaco that will connect all of those little villages and towns on the way up to Monaco, through Monaco, and back down the other side, as if you're going out towards Italy. And you can find villages and hotels that will take great care of you for a very affordable price. Jump on the train in the morning for a few francs or a few euros now. They'll drop you right in the middle of Monaco. Enjoy the race experience. Get back on the train. Come back at night and escape
probably a very
the
smart
craziness.
way to do it. Yeah.
Escape the craziness of Monaco. Yeah. Yes, but I enjoyed Monaco very much. Tremendous thrill to win that race with Monaco, with Benetton and Michael driving the car, and it'll always stand out as a landmark race, and long may it continue. I think Formula One and Monaco have got a very great relationship, a very close relationship for many years, of course, and it'd be awful to see that race drop away.
Yeah, and like I alluded to and talked about Wide World of Sports, that's the one I remember. I remember the hairpin, so there's no doubt what I was watching. So.
Yes, I mean, it's just such a crazy place to try and hold a race. And the thing that always comes back to me is, this thing about it's a small French fishing village, what are we doing? But can you imagine knocking on the door of the FIA's office in Place de la Concorde in Paris and say, hey, I've got a great idea for a motor race. It's a tiny little village by the sea. There's no infrastructure there. There's no garages there. There's no way we could really hold this race. But wouldn't it be a cool idea? I mean, they'd just say, no, of course we can't do that.
And we're going to make it the jewel in your crown at some point.
Yes, exactly. But Monaco did it. Monaco, for all the reasons that we know, made that work. Yeah, but it is a wonderful experience. Yeah, so, of course, Monaco and Monza, for obvious reasons, were we talked about the passion from the Japanese fans at Suzuka, but that in any way can never diminish the absolutely wild passion of the Tifosi in Monza.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. I mean, an extraordinary experience.
Absolutely.
And funny enough, Kevin, in sharp contrast, we were chatting about Suzuka earlier on, and I was describing how the average Japanese race fan will not cross that line if told not to cross that line, and of course they will do the opposite in Monza. But my experience in Monza was always, as soon as the flag fell, the checkered flag fell, like I'm talking the second that the flag fell, it was standard practice for all the teams to be pulling their pit equipment off the walls as fast as they could, because the crowds were coming. They were never going to be held back by the catch fencing of the circuit. They would always find a way through. And if you didn't get the gantry, the pit equipment, the jacks, the air guns, the pit board signs, if you didn't go get that stuff back inside the garage within 5 minutes, it had gone.
If it's not nailed down, it's found a home.
It was absolutely gone. Yeah. And so what would happen is, as soon as the flag fell, the garage doors would be closed. We'd get all the pit equipment in as fast as possibly could, and then the mechanics would close the garage doors. Now, if you were unfortunate enough to be caught in the pit lane with the garage doors down, and people were just banging and banging and banging on the doors to try and gain entrance to see the cars. It was a wild experience. But if you were unfortunate enough to be a Formula One engineer, mechanic, whatever, in the pit lane, at any garage door, the standard practice was to take your FOCA pass off, your credential, and slide it underneath the gap at the bottom of the door, like just an inch. The guys
just to show you let me in.
Yeah, and show that it was one of the crew, and then they would open the door by about 12 inches and pull you underneath.
Save you from the horde.
Save you from the madding horde. Yes, it was very bizarre.
Amazing.
Well, there we are. I mean, look at that. Our time for our little conversation is up.
Well, we'll definitely revisit that. There's many tales to tell from those days.
Yeah, I mean, when we set out to the idea of doing our little chats down here, gentle listener, we always, came up with this idea. We're not going to focus on motor racing. There's so many other things to talk about too. But it's a nice distraction to come back and talk about the things that are passionate to us. And motor racing has always been a great part of my life, and I know you're a big enthusiast of it too. So we're bound to come back and visit.
Yeah,
it
we'll
from time
definitely
to
do
time.
that.
Yeah.
Until then.
Yeah. Until then, we better say goodbye. Say goodbye, Kevin.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.